Well, like I said, for most people, the story about the resurrection is met with a shrug of the shoulders or a look of indifference. They've never really pressed into it because it's just not that pressing of a question to them right now. They got so many other things that they're thinking about, bills to pay and bosses to keep happy and kids to raise. But now, now with the coronavirus, for many of us, life looks different. Many of us are realizing how fragile life actually is, how near and close death can be, just like the disciples had their world turned upside down. Our world's been turned upside down. And if our only hope is the medical system or our physical health or our jobs or what we've got stored up in the bank or our national security or the quality of our leaders, then we're on shaky ground. And a time like this makes us realize that can I say it, brazen stupidity of living as if the 70 or 80 years of earthly life are all that matters, with no thoughts about death or the judgment or what comes next. Maybe some of you are finally in a place where you're ready to come to that tomb and see for yourself. Let me ask you, where's your hope for the future in a time like this? What's the basis of your optimism, of your hope for the future? Is it just in the odds? Are you like, well, only 3% die, or maybe it's 10%, but I'm young and I'm healthy, or I live in a rural environment, or I'm practicing good social distancing, so I think I'm probably okay. I'm not in that 3% or 10% or whatever. And maybe that's true, or maybe it's not. I mean, just for frame of reference here, in the global influenza pandemic of 1918, which many are comparing this to, 50 million people around the world died, which was about 3% of the world's population at the time. Over 500,000 of those were right here in the United States, which was more, by the way, than the number of American casualties in World War I and World War II combined. One historian writes about that period. He says, people felt symptoms in the morning and were dead by nightfall. Bodies were picked up from front porches to be carted away to graves dug by bulldozers. A man was shot for not wearing a mask. Schools were closed. Ministers spoke of the end of the world. At this point, the coronavirus seems to be as dangerous as that influenza pandemic of 1918, if not more so. The mortality rates are actually very similar, if not greater, for the coronavirus right now, because a person can have the coronavirus for up to 2 weeks and not know it, and therefore can spread it much more widely. Playing the odds is just not a firm place to stand, because let me give you another statistic, even more reliable. 100%. It is appointed to every single man and woman, 100% of us, wants to die, Hebrews says, and after this, the judgment. The eventual death rate of every person on earth holds steady at 100%. As John Piper says, this is a time when the fragile form of this world is felt. The seemingly solid foundations are shaking. The question we should be asking is, do we have a rock under our feet, a rock that cannot be shaken ever? See, friend, let me ask you this. What if God in love was shaking our physical foundations, letting us experience what really is a temporary tragedy in order to wake us up to a far more serious, permanent tragedy, an eternal tragedy, the tragedy of dying and not being right with God?